thought it would be a lot worse.
Well, you're a tough cookie.
I try to be.
That's good.
Not COVID, huh?
It just drains your energy. It just takes your energy and just takes it out.
I
You
hear.
have no energy left. But
Well, it's hard to picture you with no energy, Linda. It's a hard one to imagine.
Glad you're better.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, we all were sick. Everybody.
Oh,
That's it happens. I think that's sort of what's been happening, right? It hits one and then it hits many.
One to the other. Exactly.
Yeah. Well, on to our weekly baby check-in. Julie, how's Willow doing?
Yeah, is Willow joining us?
yes, I think Kendra wants to take a shower right now, so she'll be joining us probably soon.
Aw,
Very much entitled.
she's so
and
cute. Congratulations. She's so
Thank you.
cute.
Yeah. I
It's
think I see Jill Danis there too. Hey, Jill. Oh, it's nice to see you both. Oh,
They're
very
muted.
sweet. Muted, but that's okay. We see you. That's the most important thing. And in a second, I'm going to have to mute everybody anyway.
Okay, good.
Which is always a bummer. But in any case, good Shabbos to everyone. Welcome. We'll
Good
keep,
Shabbos.
letting people in. And actually, I will now mute everybody, so forgive me. But end of the service, we'll have a chance to talk, I promise. This and then mute all. And so before we get started, we're going to invite up our wonderful Shelley Lichtenstein, who's kind enough to light and bless our Shabbat candles this evening. So Shelley, whenever you are ready, and if you'd like to follow along, our blessings are on page 120, 120.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lahadlik ner shel Shabbat. Amen.
Amen, Shelley. Toda rabah.
B'vakasha.
See, there we go. That's what we call Hebrew banter, everybody. Hebrew banter. Okay, Shelley, you can relax now, but a great way for us to all begin this Shabbat. And this Shabbat, as it happens, is a confluence of several different things all taking place either on this particular Shabbat or very close to it. Within our tradition, we refer to this as Shabbat Shira. And any of us that were lucky enough to learn with Rabbi Minna last Sunday, who taught us about Parshat Beshalach and about Shirat Hayam, the song that our ancestors sang at the shores of the sea, gives the name to this particular Shabbat. And certainly I'm going to do my best to, lashir, to sing, but I hope that you're going to sing along with me at home, even though I won't be able to hear you. So that's one. The second is in our secular calendar here in the United States, a very important holiday being acknowledged on Monday, which is King Day. And as has been our tradition for many years, including, way before my time, and for many congregations around the country, we try to draw our attention to Dr. King's legacy and teachings during the Shabbat service. And when we get to my sermon a little bit later, it certainly will be the case. It also happens within the Jewish calendar again. I believe it's Sunday night, Monday, or Monday night, Tuesday. But Tu B'Shvat, a holiday which, in normal times, very easy to celebrate when you can be together with people. Very hard to celebrate over Zoom because a lot of it has to do with, taste and tactile connections to the land of Israel. But certainly this is a good weekend for you if you're feeling distanced from the land of Israel. This is a good one to read up on Tu B'Shvat, to read up on the sort of nature of the world in Israel as it is these days. So another good one for sure. And I think I'm forgetting there is a fourth thing that is now escaping my mind. One that's a little bit sadder and maybe not as known to everybody, but we lost a really wonderful rabbi this week. His name was Israel Dresner, Rabbi Cy Dresner, who some of you may not know, many of you may not know, but speaking about Dr. King, was actually one of the most significant rabbinic presences in the civil rights movement and was known actually in his day as the most arrested rabbi in American history. Largely because he was one of the few, right? A lot of rabbis claim to have been down there and doing the work, but not as many as you might think. And he really did it. He lived it, he breathed it, and he ended up in jail on more than a few occasions. And it was in the jail where he began, in many ways, his connection to Dr. King And so if you don't know who he is, it's in our tradition, we don't eulogize on Shabbat. But when Shabbat is over, it's a good idea to look up Rabbi Cy Dresner, and learn about him. And my guess is that actually you will have seen him in pictures and just had no idea who he was. But he was a lovely person. And so, all of these things are sort of swirling around in my mind as we begin our Shabbat tonight. Some of these things we'll touch on directly and some more indirectly. But as always, I hope those that are on our Zoom, those watching at home, will join with us with vigor. And again, sing your hearts out, even if we can't hear you. And Marcia, I saw what you put in the chat. I promise we will celebrate that fact at the very end of the service as well. So if you would, please open up your Sidurim, your prayer books, or click open, as it were, to page 130 as we begin Kabbalat Shabbat together. At the very top of the page, L'chu Neranena. L'chu Neranena, L'chu Neranena, L'chu Neranena, L'Adonai. L'chu Neranena, L'chu Neranena, L'chu Neranena, L'Adonai. Naria, Naria, Letzor Yishenu, Nekad Malfanav Betodam. Naria, Naria, Letzor Yishenu, Bizmirat Naria Lo. L'chu Neranena, L'chu Neranena, L'chu Neranena, L'Adonai. L'chu Neranena, L'chu Neranena, L'chu Neranena, L'Adonai. We're now on page 131, Shiru L'Adonai. Shiru L'Adonai, Shiru Shir Chadash, Shiru L'Adonai, Kol Haaretz, Shiru L'Adonai, Baruchu Shemo, Basru Meyom Leyom Yeshuato, Shiru L'Adonai, Baruchu Shemo, Basru Meyom Leyom Yeshuato, Shiru L'Adonai, Shiru Shir Chadash, Shiru L'Adonai, Kol Haaretz, Shiru L'Adonai, Baruchu Shemo, Basru Meyom Leyom Yeshuato, Shiru L'Adonai, Baruchu Shemo, Basru Meyom Leyom Yeshuato. We'll turn now to the bottom of page 132, Or Zarua. Or Zarua L'Tzadik, Ulehishrei Lev Simcha. Or Zarua L'Tzadik, Ulehishrei Lev Simcha. Simechu tzadikim b'Adonai, v'hodu lezecher kodsho. Simchu tzadikim b'Adonai, v'hodu lezecher kodsho. We'll turn now to page 134 at the very top. Zamru L'Adonai Bechinor, Bechinor V'kol Zimra, B'chatzot Rot V'kol Shofar, Ahariu Lifnei HaMelech Adonai, Hiram Hayamum Lo, Tevel Veyoshveba, Neharot Yimchahu Chaf, Yachad Harim Yiranenu, Lifnei Adonai Kiva, Lishpot Haaretz, Lishpot Tevel Betzedek, Ve'amim b'mesharim, Hiram hayamum lo, Tevel ve'yoshveva, Neharot yimchahu chaf, Yachad harim yiranenu. We're now on page 135 at the very middle of the page in Hebrew, Romamu. רוממו אדוני אלוהינו והשתחוו להר קודשו. רוממו אדוני אלוהינו והשתחוו להר קודשו כי קדוש אדוני אלוהינו רוממו. כי קדוש אדוני אלוהינו רוממו. רוממו אדוני אלוהינו והשתחוו להר קודשו. All right, we're going to turn to page 138, Lechadodi. Just out of curiosity, for those that are on the Zoom, Neil and Andrew, they said that my volume is going in and out and stuff. Is that happening to all of you or just them? Okay. Sorry, Neil and Andrew. I wish I had an answer for that, but thanks for letting me know in any case. We try to make the best possible scenario we can. All right, we're at page 138, Lechadodi, and again, we'll do the first, second, fifth, and ninth paragraphs. Lecha dodi likrat kala pnei Shabbat nekabela. 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 Shamor v'zachor b'dibur echad ishmianu el hamiuchad Adonai echad u'shemo echad l'shem u'tiferet v'litila. Lecha dodi likrat kala pnei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha dodi likrat kala pnei Shabbat nekabela. Likrat Shabbat lechu v'nelecha ki mekor haberacha merosh mikedem nesucha sof maase b'machshava tchila. Lecha dodi likrat kala pnei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha dodi likrat kala pnei Shabbat nekabela. Fifth paragraph on page 139. Hitoreri ki v'horech kumi uri shir dahaberi kevod Adonai alayich nigla. Lecha dodi likrat kala pnei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha dodi likrat kala pnei Shabbat nekabela. Ninth paragraph. Boi v'shalom ateret bala gam besimcha u'betzor toch emunei aham segula. Boi chala Lecha dodi likrat kala pnei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha dodi likrat kala pnei Shabbat nekabela. We'll turn now to page 140, Tzadik Katamar, in the Hebrew, just where it indents in the middle of the page. Tzadik Katamar yifrach kerez balbanon yizke shetulim beveit Adonai bechatzrot Eloheinu yafrichu. Od yenun beseva deshenim vehananim yiyu lehagin ki ashar Adonai Zuri velo havlatabohu. We'll turn now to page 144 for the Chatzi Kaddish. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei rabba b'alma divrach yirtei v'yamlich malchutei v'chayechon u'vyomechon u'chayei lechol beit Yisrael b'agala u'bizman kariv v'himeru amen. Yehi shemei rabba mevarach le'alam li'almei halmaya yitbarach Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitar v'yitrama v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei dekudsha b'richu leila min kol berchata v'shirata tushvechata v'nechemata damihiran v'hamam v'yimeru amen. We'll turn now to page 146 for the Baruch Hu. Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Le'olam Vahed. We'll turn now to page 149 and read together in English at the top of the page. Praise to you, Adonai, our God, from whom the evening flows. Your wisdom sets the way on which time and season glide. Your breath guides the sail of the stars. Creator of the tide of time and light, you guide the current of day into night. As heaven spans to infinity, you set its course for eternity. Praise to you, Adonai, our God, from whom the evening flows. Umavir yom umevi laila, umavdil ben yom uven laila, Adonai tzvahot shemo. El chai v'kayam tamidim l'chaleinu le'olam va'ed baruch at Adonai amahari v'arhabim. We'll read together now in English on page 150. Everlasting love you offered your people Israel by teaching us Torah and mitzvot, laws and precepts. Therefore, Adonai our God, when we lie down and when we rise up, we will meditate on your laws and your commandments. We will rejoice in your Torah forever. Day and night we will reflect on them, for they are our life, and doing them lengthens our days. Never remove your love from us. Praise to you, Adonai, who loves your people Israel. Yehem chayinu ve'orech yaminu, v'hem negei yomam v'layla, v'avatcha al tasir mimenu li'olamim, baruch at Adonai, Ohev Amo Yisrael. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Please join me on page 154. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם, בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך, ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם להיות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם, אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים. Ani Adonai Elohechem. Adonai Elohechem Emet. Let's read together now on the top of page 157. Standing on the parted shores of history, we still believe what we were taught before ever we stood at Sinai's foot, that wherever we go, it is eternally Egypt, that there is a better place, a promised land, that the winding way to that promise passes through the wilderness, that there is no way to get from here to there except by joining hands and marching together. As we turn to page 158, Michamocha. Ya bye bye bim 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 bam, ya bye bye bim bam, ya bye bye bim 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 bam, ya bye bye bim bam, ya bye 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 bye, ya bye bye bim bam, ya bye 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 bye, ya bye bye bim bam. Mi chamocha bailim Adonai, mi chamocha nedar b'kodesh norat hilot. Oh, sefele, norat hilot. Oh, sefele, ya bye bye bim 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 bam, ya bye bye bim bam, ay bye bim 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 bam, ya bye bye bim bam, ya bye 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 bye, ya bye bye bim bam, ya bye 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 bye, ya bye bye bim bam. Malchutecha ra'uvanecha bokeam lifnei Moshe Miriam ze lianu ve'amru Adonai yimloch leolam va'ed v'nemar kifad Adonai et Yaakov u'golo miyad chazak mimenu Baruch at Adonai gal Yisrael. Let there be love and understanding among us. Let peace and friendship be our shelter from life's storms. Adonai, help us to walk with good companions, to live with hope in our hearts and eternity in our thoughts, that we may lie down in peace and rise up, waiting to do your will. Ashkivenu, page 160. Ashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu leshalom v'hamidenu Shomreinu lechayim. Ashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu leshalom v'hamidenu Shomreinu lechayim. Ushmor tzeiteinu uvoeinu lechayim u'shalom me'ata ve'ad olam. Ashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu leshalom v'hamidenu shomreinu lechayim. Blessed are you, Adonai, guardian of Israel, whose shelter of peace is spread over us, over all your people Israel, and over Yerushalayim. We turn now to page 162 of Vishamar at the very top of the page. Veshameru b'nei Israel et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam Einai beheni uvein b'nei Yisrael oti le'olam ki sheishet yamim asa Adonai et hashamayim et haaretz Vayom Hashevi Shabbat Shabbat Vayinafash. In a moment, I'll help us to begin the Amidah together on page 164. And then, as always, we'll go on our own pace, in our own time, in our own way, in our silent Amidah. And as always, please really do take your time. It may take us a few minutes. I'm going to turn my screen off, but make this time valuable to you. Make it meaningful to you in whatever way it may be. Something tells me in the Tapkan Kent family, it's just going to be hugging Willow. But for the rest of us, prayer book is helpful And again, we'll begin on page 164 and then continue silently from there. Adonai sefatai tiftach ufi yagi tehilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Ose shalom bimroma, uyase shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel. Yahase shalom, Yahase shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yahase shalom, Yahase shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. We'll turn now to page 371 as we offer our Mishaberach, our healing prayer for this evening. In a moment, I'll read our Mishaberach list, but if you're on the Zoom and you'd like to add additional names, you're welcome to add them in the chat. Those watching at home, you can say your loved ones' names out loud or simply hold them in your hearts. Tonight, our community begins by thinking of, and we're happy that she's feeling better, Linda Guessford, but we'll keep you on, Linda, until we know you're 100%. Chaim Ben Yosef Bechava, Norma Paulsak, Dina Batchana, Bensi Tepper, Cecilia Hirsch, Len Tinney, Zipporah Ahava, Gittel Bat Shmuel V'Aviva, Bruce Steger, Chana Ruth Batsara, Jeff Bager, David Tasher, Jim Cohn, Monique Rathbun, Lindsay Epstein, Dolores Michka, Sylvia Oren, Yerachmiel Ben Hinda, Paloma Chalhan, Samuel Moskowitz, Chaim Leib, Joyce Weinberg, Rick Gold, Stu Pollack, Jane London, Catherine Guarino, Judy Stern, Miriam Cornfield, Roz Brody, Chana Ruth Batsara, Fagel Tzipora Bat Elisheva Batsara, Richard Gambino, Michelle Sawicki, Idol Basha Bat Yitzchak, Tzvi Menachem and Chaim, Rivka Bat Devora, Amy and Gavin Tucker, Janice Kurz, David Dowling, Israel Ben Yitzchak, Lorraine Danis, Buddy Kassoff, Shelley Newmark, David Kyle Klopman, Rivka Bat Rachel, Sarah Bat Chana, Moshe Eliezer Ben Sibia, Peretz Ben Yehuda, Leah Bat Naomi, Gedalia Ben Leah, Justin Banner, Tzipora Ahava Bat Yehudit Rachel, Jane Beard Cass, Amy Cass, Steve Levine, Ira Madras, Ephraim Raphael Ben Esther, Myra Maslin, Jay Fagan, and Mike Klinghoffer. And again, we'll add those names that have been added to the chat, and we'll join together on page 371 as we sing our Misha Berach together in the middle of the page. Misha Berach Avotenu Mekor HaBracha Leimotenu. May the source of strength to bless the ones before us help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say Amen. Misheberach imotenu mekor habracha Lavotenu, bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say Amen. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. It's great to see all of you on our Zoom and imagining seeing all of you on our streams as well. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the service, it has become a custom in our community and actually in many, many communities across the country that on the Shabbat, generally preceding King Day, which is observed on Monday, that we carve out some time, in our sacred worship, to both remember and I think just as importantly, to be inspired by the teachings and the words of Dr. King. Now, there are many different ways to do this, but I started a couple of years ago with what I think actually is the most important and helpful way, which is to actually hear his words and to begin from his words and then to push further forward and to remind ourselves that, again, while King's life was cut short far too early, and while I've lived my entire lifetime right after his passing, there are few people I can think of in my world who have had as important and lasting a legacy. And I think that the connection between the Jewish experience and the experience of the African American, the Black community in this country has a remarkable connection. That connection at various points in time feels closer and further apart, but for King, it was front and center. So what I want to do tonight, actually, I can't share all of his words, it's too long of a sermon, but a reminder to everyone that while King is best known for his work as a civil rights leader, and while he never looked at it as being two separate things, his greatest gift, his greatest skill set for the most part, was that he was a remarkable preacher. He was not just an orator, he was a preacher. He lived and believed his faith, and his faith was the thing that helped propel him and those that worked with him to create, again, which we know is not a fulfilled vision, but the beginnings of a fulfilled vision of true justice and equality in this country. But he never lost the connection, in particular, with Scripture, and in particular, the most ancient Scripture that is shared between his Christian faith and ours, which is the Torah itself. And of course, as it becomes sort of obvious now, was maybe not so obvious then, a connection to the story of the Exodus specifically, and of what that story meant in contemporary terms to him and to those who were fighting for civil rights here in America. So the sermon I'm going to share with you, at least again, a little bit of, and you'll forgive me, last thing in the world I would ever want to do is to edit the work of a genius, but to fit it into time constraints. But the beauty of things is that you can find it in its entirety online. Was a sermon that he delivered on 17th of May, 1956, at the Cathedral of St. John the Divine in New York City. And it was the second anniversary, if I'm not mistaken, of the Supreme Court ruling in Brown versus Board of Education, which in effect ended the legal basis for segregation, in particular in schools in the South, and was considered to be one of, if not the most significant civil rights judgment that affected the civil rights movement and those in this country who were living in segregated South in particular. And it was something that gathered basically together some of the great preachers, the great orators, the great thinkers of that time period. And if you've ever been to the Cathedral of St. John the Divine in the city, you can imagine what that room filled to capacity was some of the greatest speakers in the world, all speaking what that would have felt like. And from what I understand, of all the sermons that he gave, this is held in one of the highest regards in terms of the power of the delivery, but also, I think, ultimately of the words themselves. And as you will hear very quickly in the title of the sermon is The Death of Evil Upon the Seashore. Again, the death of evil upon the seashore. And he begins with a quote, a familiar quote, and one, as again, this just happens to be circumstance that we are reading in the Torah at exactly this time of year, what is being described really in this particular sermon of Dr. King's all those years ago. And so he begins by quoting from Exodus 14, chapter 14, verse 30. And Israel saw the Egyptians dead upon the seashore. He begins, there is hardly anything more obvious than the fact that evil is present in the universe. It projects its nagging, prehensile tentacles into every level of human existence. We may debate over the origin of evil, but only the person victimized with a superficial optimism will debate over its reality. Evil is with us as a stark, grim, and colossal reality. The Bible affirms the reality of evil in glaring terms. It symbolically pictures it in the work of a serpent who comes to inject a discord into the beautiful, harmonious symphony of life in a garden. It sees it in nagging tares disrupting the orderly growth of stately wheat. The Bible is crystal clear in its perception of evil. But we need not stop with the glaring examples of the Bible to establish the reality of evil. We need only to look out into the wide arena of everyday life. We have seen evil in tragic lust and in inordinate selfishness. We have seen it in high places where men are willing to sacrifice truth on the altars of their self-interest. We have seen it in imperialistic nations trampling over other nations with the iron feet of oppression. We have seen it clothed in the garments of calamitous wars, which left battlefields painted with blood, filled nations with widows and orphans, and sent men home physically handicapped and psychologically wrecked. We have seen evil in all of its tragic dimensions. So in a sense, the whole history of life is the history of a struggle between good and evil. There seems to be a tension at the very core of the universe. All the great religions have seen this tension at the center of life. And each of these religions recognized that in the midst of the upward climb of goodness, there is the downpull of evil. The Hebraic Christian tradition is clear, however, in affirming that in the long struggle between good and evil, good eventually emerges as the victor. Evil was ultimately doomed by the powerful, insurgent forces of good. Biblical religion, he says, recognized long ago what William Cullen Bryant came to see in the modern world, quote, truth crushed to earth will rise again. And what Carlyle came to see, quote, no lie can live forever. A graphic example of this truth is found in an incident in the early history of the Hebrew people. You will remember that at a very early stage in her history, the children of Israel were reduced to the bondage of physical slavery under the gripping yoke of Egyptian rule. Egypt was the symbol of evil in the form of humiliating oppression, ungodly exploitation, and crushing domination. The Israelites symbolized goodness in the form of devotion and dedication to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. These two forces were in a continual struggle against each other. Egypt struggling to maintain her oppressive yoke, and Israel struggling to gain freedom from this very yoke. Finally, however, these Israelites, through the providence of God, were able to cross the Red Sea and thereby get out of the hands of Egyptian rule. The Egyptians, in a desperate attempt to prevent the Israelites from escaping, had their armies go to the Red Sea. But as soon as the Egyptians got into the Red Sea, the parted waves swept back upon them, and the rushing waters of the sea soon drowned all of them. And as the Israelites looked back, all they could see was here and there a poor drowned body beaten upon the seashore. For the Israelites, this was a great moment. It was the end of a frightful period in their history. It was a joyous daybreak that had come to end the long night of their captivity. But this story symbolizes something basic about the universe. It symbolizes something much deeper than the drowning of a few men. For no one can rejoice at the death or the defeat of a human person. This story, King says, at bottom, symbolizes the death of evil. It was the death of inhuman oppression and ungodly exploitation. He continues, the death of the Egyptians upon the seashore is a glaring symbol of the ultimate doom of evil in its struggle with good. There is something in the very nature of the universe which is on the side of Israel in its struggle with every Egypt. There is something in the very nature of the universe which ultimately comes to the aid of goodness in its perennial struggle with evil. What we are seeing now, he says, in this struggle, in the struggle of his era, and of course, if you're hearing this and not seeing the parallels in our lifetime, open your eyes. What we are seeing now, he says, in this struggle is the gradual victory of the forces of freedom and justice. The Red Sea has opened, and today most of these exploited masses have won their freedom from Egypt of colonialism and are now free to move toward the promised land of economic security and cultural development. And as they look back, they clearly see the evils of colonialism and imperialism dead upon the seashore. In our own struggle for freedom and justice in this country, we have gradually seen the death of evil. Many years ago, the Black person in this country was thrown into the Egypt of segregation, and his great struggle has been to free himself from the crippling restrictions and paralyzing effects of this vicious system. For years, it looked like he would never get out of this Egypt. The closed Red Sea always stood before him with discouraging dimensions. There were always those pharaohs with hardened hearts who, despite the cries of many a Moses, refused to let these people go. But one day, through a world-shaking decree by the 9 justices of the Supreme Court of America, and an awakened moral conscience of many white persons of goodwill, backed up by the providence of God, the Red Sea was opened, and the forces of justice marched through to the other side. As we look back, we see segregation caught in the rushing waters of historical necessity. Evil in the form of injustice and exploitation cannot survive. There is a Red Sea in history that ultimately comes to carry the forces of goodness to victory, and that same Red Sea closes in to bring doom and destruction to the forces of evil. This is our hope, says King. This is the hope and conviction that all men of goodwill live by. It is at bottom the conviction that all reality hinges on moral foundations, and that the whole cosmic universe has spiritual control. It is therefore fitting and proper that we assemble here just 2 years after the Supreme Court's momentous decision on desegregation, and praise God for his power and the greatness of his purpose, and pray that we gain the vision and the will to be his co-workers in this struggle. He closes very powerfully. Let us not despair. Let us not lose faith in mankind, and certainly not in God. We must believe that a prejudiced mind can be changed, and that man, by the grace of God, can be lifted from the valley of hate to the high mountain of love. Let us remember that as we struggle against Egypt, we must have love, compassion, and understanding goodwill for those against whom we struggle, helping them to realize that as we seek to defeat the evils of Egypt, we are not seeking to defeat them, but to help them as we help ourselves. God has a great plan for this world. God's purpose is to achieve a world where all people will live together as brothers and sisters, and where every person recognizes the dignity and worth of all human personality. God is seeking at every moment of God's existence to lift human beings from the bondage of some evil Egypt, carrying them through the wilderness of discipline, and finally to the promised land of personal and social integration. May it not be that this is entirely within the realm of possibility. I prefer to live by the faith that the kingdoms of this world shall become the kingdoms of our collective Lord, and that Lord shall reign forever and ever. And he closes, hallelujah, hallelujah. So I chose tonight, as I said, as I've done in previous years, to use King's own words rather than try to filter them through my own. But again, to see the prescience of a person speaking in 1956, and if we had changed the date to 2020, it would have been really just as powerful and just as appropriate. And King, of course, had an optimism about himself. He believed that things were on the right kind of trajectory from that point on. But remember, again, this is 1956. This is not 1965, 1966, 1968. There is a lot of work that still has to be done at the point in which he is speaking. So his optimism wasn't just words. It was the thing that propelled him and his partners through the work that was necessary over the following decade plus to take this initial victory in the Supreme Court and to push even further. Because segregation, as we know, didn't end in 1956. It didn't end in 1954. It took generations, really, and it still, to some degree, exists outside of the legal context, but in various other ways in this country, not just in the South. Okay, you may remember from some of our learning opportunities last summer, Long Island itself is considered to be still, to this day, one of the most segregated parts of our entire country. So lest we think that King did his job and now we can all rest on his laurels, we all know that that is not the case. And we know that King Day is not just a Monday off, a day where we go, to spend with family or go skiing or those kinds of things. It ought to be for this country a day of reckoning and a day of deep consideration, okay, of not just a person and not just a person's legacy and not just a person's brilliance, but really of what King stood for. And as I pointed out, King was deeply enmeshed in his belief, in his faith, in his connection ultimately to God. There was not a single thing that he did where he didn't see this within a religious construct as well. And as he and so many others have looked to the story of the Exodus, the story of our people, as an inspiration for what it means to move forward, let's remember that the story of our ancestors and their struggles didn't end at the shores of the Red Sea. As much as we might like to think that evil, in fact, was destroyed in that moment, the reality is there was a lot more to come and a lot more that we are still living to this day. And unfortunately, I think, King's words are correct. If there is one incontrovertible fact, one thing that we can all agree upon is that evil does exist in this world, and it manifests itself in many ways. But I think his lesson at the end of the sermon is just as important as his opening remarks. And that is really instructing us to be not just resilient and persevering, but to be aware of the fact that by definition, we are going to be in the work of trying to create a just world. We are going to interact sometimes with our closest friends and family who may disagree, who may find reasons to maybe not disagree, but to walk slowly when we ought to be running, right? Who may be on the complete opposite side of a political spectrum, who may be in a very different place than us. And what is his instruction? What is his words? He says that we must never lose also our love and our compassion and understanding for these people, even when they are screaming at us and telling us that we are wrong, even when they are holding back others from living the life that they ought to live. It's remarkable that he still has the thought to say, be compassionate to those people as to anybody else, because we have to believe in the idea that a bigotous person can cease to be so, right? That we can overturn what seems to be an enmeshed or ingrained reality. And I believe King's words. I act and live my life constantly in that vein, that I don't shut the window on people, even when I want to, even when I want to punch them in the face, even though I'm a pacifist, right? In my mind, even in those circumstances. Because I know at the end of the day, the only way that justice will ever really prevail, the only way that evil will ever really be conquered, is if we are able to do this together, okay? That we have to find some way to bridge the gap, that we have to find some way to talk and to challenge and to keep pushing until we really get to the place that I think King envisioned in so many of his sermons and in so much of his work. So I think it's important that not just our community, but as I said, Jewish communities all around the country tonight are spending their time where they might otherwise be talking about the Parsha or some other, dedicated, solely myopically viewed Jewish topic, see and understand that this is not just any Shabbat, and that this is not just any holiday on Monday, and it was not just any person. And then it's something that I think each one of us, especially in the Jewish community, really need to reconcile with, is that we can't rest on historical laurels. Okay, we can't live as if it's still the 60s and we've done our job. We still have much, much more work to do. And so in the same way, right, Dr. King, Rabbi Heschel, Rabbi Dresner, right, so many people who really were there on the streets fighting, perhaps it's not in the streets anymore, but it's in, small conversations. It's at dinner tables. It's on buses. It's in all these various places in which we are confronted and confront the injustices and the bigots that we see in the world around us. And that we have a task and a responsibility, and an especially important one as the Jewish people, as the ancestors who experienced the first Exodus and the feeling of freedom that he describes so beautifully in this sermon. And I think we have a lot of work to do on an individual level, and I think especially on a communal level. So I hope that this will be a Shabbat in which we will carve out time amongst our Shabbat learning, our Torah learning, whatever it might be, and certainly on Monday, to take some time and to push yourselves a little bit, right? Don't just read or listen to I Have a Dream. Okay, King gave more sermons than there are days of the week, the days of the calendar. You can find them all online in some form or the other. Read them, and in some cases you can even see them or hear them. Listen to the man's words, listen to the man's preaching and teaching, and I hope come away inspired. And I really thank all of you for indulging me tonight. And again, for those that may want to read the sermon in its entirety, it's called, let me just get again, The Death of Evil Upon the Seashore, delivered on the 17th of May, 1956 at the Cathedral of St. John the Divine. So with that, again, I wish everyone a Shabbat Shalom. And at this point, we will turn back to our prayer books, page 586 at the very bottom of the page, Aleinu L'Shabeach. Aleinu L'Shabeach L'Adon HaKol Latet Gedula Liotzer Breshit Shelo Asanu Kigoye Haratzot Velo Samanu Kamishbechot Adama Shelo Samachelkenu Kahem Vegor Aleinu Kechol Hamonaham Vanahachnu Korim Umishtachavim Umodim Lifnei Melech Malchei Hamachim Hakadosh Baruch Hu V'nehemar V'haya Adonai Lemelech Al Kol Haaretz Bayom Hahu Yeh Adonai Echad Ushemo Echad. I'll now invite those who are mourning and those observing yahrzeit. If you choose, you may rise. In a moment, we'll offer the mourners Kaddish together. We'll first begin by thinking of those who've passed in our community in recent months. Dr. John Aberkin, Morris Dickstein, Linda Donath, Ellen Frank, Sandra Furman, Evelyn Gelb, Arthur Grossman, Gerald Hirsch, Mark Joseph, Deirdre Klein, Jeanette Kopp, Leo Leibowitz, Audrey Lubo, Marty Lynn, Jerry Monroe, Nancy Nagel, Harry Olstein, Geraldine Rosen, Harriet Roth, Jeannie Rubin, Howard Schreier, Paul Silver, Marlise Silverberg, Blanche Sklar, Rita Sandra Snyder, and Joan Strong Tangzilius, and Virginia Tisser. We also marked the yahrzeits that occurred during the last week for Samuel Benziner, Lori Beldany, Leon Blaufarb, Nancy Copland, Donald Doctorow, Ernst Eckstein, Louis Field, Rose Goodstadt, Elaine Grossman, Olive Hennefield, Esther Hirsch, Kurt Ivers, Harry Charles Karp, Max Katz, Hy Cornfield, Sidney Meinikoff, Jay Morris, Debbie Newmark, Rebecca Nevins, Edna Pastor, Saul Rubin, Murray Rudman, Lucille Siegel, Rebecca Steinberg, Alan Tishman, and Harold Weisselberg. In addition to the names that we mentioned, certainly as Janet just added as well, Faith Diskin. If you have additional names of anybody else that is passed away and you're on the Zoom, you're welcome to add those names in the chat. And if you are at home, to simply remember your loved ones or say their names out loud if you so choose. I'll invite the mourners to join with me now on page 598. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei rabbah. Be'alma divrach cherutei v'yamlich malchutei. V'chayichon uv'yomechon uv'chayei dechol beit Yisrael. V'agala v'zman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei shemei rabbah mevarach le'alam u'li'almei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei dekudsha b'richu. Leila min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechamata, da'amiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehi shalama rabba min shemaya v'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mramav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Zikranam livracha, may every one of their memories be for a blessing. Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Again, thank you everybody who's on our Zoom. Thank you everybody who's watching at home. A few important announcements. And if you see me looking to the side, it's because I have another screen over here that I can see things more clearly. So I promise, so it's kind of like cue cards. Not quite, but important announcements. Again, please join us for Shabbat services live stream tomorrow at 9:30. That's available again on our website, YouTube, or Facebook page. And to join us for Torah study beginning at 12 o'clock on Zoom. And again, a reminder that through the end of January, we are virtual for all programs and Shabbat services. We'll be reassessing as we get closer to the end of the month, and hopefully we'll be able to be back in hybrid fashion pretty soon. A reminder again that over the weekend, if you have signed up for it, you should have gotten access to watch and screen the film that is called Rosenwald, which is the story of Julius Rosenwald, founder of Sears and Roebuck, who joined together with African American communities in the South to build schools. It's really a very powerful film. And again, anybody who has signed up will have access to watch it. And then you can join us on Sunday at 7 o'clock for a Q&A with the film's creator, Aviva Kempner, who is well known and has created many remarkable films over the last few decades. So again, you can join us 7 o'clock. Just please make sure that you sign up again on Eventbrite, and you should receive the link to watch the film at your leisure over the weekend. Reminder, on Monday, I believe Niddah Mitzvah is meeting, it says here at 9 o'clock. I don't know whether that's accurate, so maybe one of our knitting people can tell us. Is that okay? Marsha's saying yes, so that's good enough for me. And a reminder that the Hebrew School will not be in session, and Social Justice Committee will be not having its regular meeting in commemoration of King Day on Monday. My Wednesday class on Heschel and the Prophets is at 12 o'clock. Virtual Hebrew School will begin that afternoon at 4 o'clock. Also on Thursday at 7. This Thursday, Shelley? Yeah, okay. This Thursday at 7 o'clock, our virtual trivia night is back, which is always a lot of fun. It's more fun in person for sure, but trivia night online actually works really well. So we hope very much that you'll join us this Thursday, 7 o'clock. Register on our website or through the weekly e-blast. And of course, my Friday class is at 9:15. Journey to the Heart of the Siddur. Reminder also that Maureen's Haven is coming up again on Sunday, January 30th. Please sign up to help. Shelley, was there anything specifically you wanted to say about that, or is that okay? Anybody who's interested in helping out, please contact Shelley. She will definitely tell you where we could use the help, and there's always help that is needed. Just a reminder again, please do check your e-blasts and your regular calendars and all those good things. And we're planning some really great stuff for February. And just a last note for those that joined us last Sunday for Rabbi Minna Bromberg's wonderful teaching. If you happen to miss it, I'm just in the middle of editing a few parts of it out. There was some chavruta time, and it's like 10 minutes of nothing. So I just need time to edit it, but it will be up and available on YouTube probably by the end of Shabbat. So anybody who did miss it but would like to watch it, you are welcome to do so. But really was an incredible learning opportunity, and a great thank you to Ruth Joseph, Leah Oppenheimer, Margaret Bromberg, and really all the people who have supported our Women's Torah Commentary group over the years. It's become really, as I was saying to Ruth and Leah this morning, such an important part of our learning, such an important part of our shul and our temple community. And having Rabbi Minna, who of course is from this community, teaching from Israel was just such a wonderful treat. So again, just keep an eye on our YouTube channel. Sometime probably Saturday night, it should be up and available, and you're welcome to watch it whenever you would like to. Beyond that, I think those were all of my announcements. Shelley, did I miss anything? No. Neil, I know I'm looking at you just thinking, again, if you haven't been paying attention on our Facebook page, there are up-to-date pictures of the renovation and everything that's going on, and it's really going at pace. We're doing really well. Neil gave us the thumbs up, and he's keeping the foot on the gas for sure, and all the members of our building committee have worked so hard on it. So again, just looking forward to that day when we'll be in our as they say, the alt noi, the old new shul, as it were, and it's really going to be a great thing. So Neil, after we get to the kibbutzing part, you can give us some more updated things. I'll see if I can pull up a picture. So beyond that, I'll wish everyone again a Shabbat Shalom, and hopefully a very meaningful King Day weekend. And we're going to close before Kiddush with Shalom Aleichem, which, again, these are the page numbers I should just know off the top of my head already. Page 627, and you're welcome to join. And if you happen to be sitting next to a loved one, put your arm around them. This is a good one. And again, focused on the main idea, right? Shalom, a peace of wholeness and a world that may not yet exist, but we hope with King's optimism and with our hard work will exist in our lifetime. Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Hasharet, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Boachem Leshalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon. Mihi melech malchei hamlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Baruchuni leshalom malachei hashalom malachei elyon. Mihi melech malchei hamlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Seitchem leshalom malachei hashalom malachei elyon. Mihi melech malachei hamlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And we'll turn back to page 123, if I remember correctly, for Kiddush. And if you have a Kiddush cup handy, you're welcome to join. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kinshanu b'mitzvotav v'ratza b'hanu v'shabbat kodsho v'yahava uvratzon idchilanu zikaron l'maaseh v'reishit ki hu yom techila lemikrae kodesh zecher l'tziat Mitzrayim. Kivanu v'acharta, ve'otanu kidashta, mikol hamim, ve'shabbat kodshecha, ve'ahava uvratzon inchaltanu, Baruch atah Adonai, mekadesh HaShabbat. Amen. L'chaim and Shabbat Shalom to all of you. I'll invite those who are on the Zoom. If you'd like to stick around and kibitz for a little while, you are more than welcome. For those on the stream, we will say Shabbat Shalom to you. And again, services tomorrow, 9:30.